You're listening to the Veterinary Innovation Podcast.
You're listening to the Veterinary Innovation Podcast. My name is Shawn Wilkie, and along with my awesome co-host, we interview the innovators in this space every week. Ivan, please get us started.
Hey, I'm Ivan Zak. I'm very excited to introduce our guest today, Coleen Ellis. She's driven by the loss of her Cheshire dog in 2004. Founded Pet Angel Memorial Center, evolving into an advocate for meaningful pet death care services. In 2009, she expanded her mission to Two Hearts Pet Loss Center, becoming a globally recognized speaker and mentor in pet grief support. Coleen is certified thanatologist and pet loss professional. Authored books like Pet Parents, A Journey Through Unconditional Love and Grief, and co-authored Forever Friend, while also playing pivotal roles in various pet loss and end-of-life care organizations. Coleen, welcome to the show. Thank you for finding the time.
Hey guys, what a pleasure.
So how did you end up, it kind of says the story in the biography, but I want to hear it firsthand. How did you end up in this direction and became passionate about something that is really sad and could be sad, but if it's done well, I think it's there's a lot of meaning in it.
Yeah, you know what, you guys? I asked you right before you hit record, what do we want people to know about this discussion we have today? And you said we want them to hear about innovative things, right? Well, my entire career has been spent in death care. And I don't know how you guys feel, but I don't know that I could innovate death as it is. But here's what I could innovate. I could innovate how we explore that death, how we handle that death, especially when it comes to the death of a sweet little precious animal. And so that's what got me into this, the death of my sweet little dog. And what I wanted to have, you guys, is I wanted to have the same kind of support and facility and services and options and all that kind of stuff that we have when we lose a human being. And so that started my career, jump started it. And now I'm very active, not only in the education with pet parents and veterinary professionals, but also with the International Association for Animal Hospice and Palliative Care in how to do that walk up to that day. And so that's the thing that I wanted to be a very big part of. And that's the thing that drives me every day, you guys. It fills me up to know that we've made a difference at a very vulnerable time.
That's amazing. We had a couple people on the podcast that are in that realm, and I'm always fascinated. How do you take a really sad thing and make it into a career goal? If you were to describe the radical black and white change before you existed with your vision and what you do and what everybody else is doing, where's that gap? What does it look like when everybody who doesn't learn about it a lot and then knows everything that you're trying to tell them about it? What's the difference? What's the change in the story of, that is before you and after you? Like what is the change in how do you approach the loss of pet?
I think before we just took it, it was what it was. It's a very disenfranchised grief. It still is a very disenfranchised grief. We've got in our population here in the US, 70% of people who own an animal. So that means you got 30% who don't. And so there's going to be 3 out of 10 people that I can tell them my dog died, and they're going to react with, so what? And who cares? And it's just a dog, and any other kind of hurtful comment to me as a loving pet parent. If I had to tell you, if I could put a finger on what I believe a little bit of the change has been, and we've still got a lot of work to do, is that, it's the old statement, when you know more, you do better. And for pet parents who might be shamed with the loss of a sweet animal, to give them permission to do what they want to do, to grieve and to mourn, and to even have a ritual for that animal. I want them to be able to do that differently. Ivan, you kind of raised your eyebrow when you were saying the word thanatology. And I want to bring it back to you. If you think about us in the veterinary world, where does the word thana, which is death studies, that's what that certification is, where does the word thana appear in the work we do every day? And you know the answer, euthanasia, right? And so it's euthanasia being a good death, a fortunate death. And so what we want to do is continue to give pet parents the permission to ask questions and to have a better experience, a more loving experience, a more peaceful experience, as well as giving our veterinary professionals the tools to create an experience at death, not an event of death. Two vastly different things. And again, we have a lot of work to do, but I'm starting to see the change where veterinary professionals are doing death differently. Hashtag do death differently. And I'm starting to see where pet parents are getting the permission they need to ask the questions for what they want at the end of life and the end of life walk for their animal.
Yeah, it's so fascinating and such a, it's a dark topic in many ways. We're talking about the death of loved ones, whether they're humans or pets. I think some humans like their pets more than they like their relatives. So I think that
For sure.
there's a ton of sense in the work that you do. One of the questions that I wanted to ask Coleen is what is it exactly that you do? I think you wear many hats, but what's your day-to-day role look like, specifically as it concerns the topic that we're speaking about?
So my day to day right now is to do podcasts like this that educate people, whether it's professionals or even pet owners, pet parents, educates them on what they can do differently at the end of life with their pets. So that's one thing I do. I love writing. Oh my gosh, I love writing. I do a lot of blogs. I do a lot of interviews with people for magazines and things like that. And of course, I have my own books that are on the market. And so I do a lot of that. I'm an executive director for the International Association for Animal Hospice and Palliative Care. So that takes up a lot of my time with our members who are solely focused on end of life with pets and how we can create again an experience in that final walk. And so I dedicate a lot of time to that. I'm also a coach. I do a lot of business coaching. I do a lot of business consulting, and I stay in my lane with people in particular who are wanting to either brand or maybe rebrand an end of life operation for animals, and very actively involved with people all over the world who are looking to do things like that for their business, and everything in between that spectrum of what I just said. Anybody calls me with an end of life subject about animals, I can generally wrap my arms around it and get into it and assist.
So 2004, 20 years ago, you started down this path. Where were we at then? What did the landscape look like then for end of life care, the death of pets? And what has happened in the last 20 years from innovating the experience of the loss of one of our cherished pets?
Guys, I'm going to say this to you, and I hate to say this to you, but I'm going to do it. 20 years ago, when I approached a vet clinic and I told them about my little sweet pet funeral home that I had just started, and I was there to help their families, their loving families, in the end of life with their pets, and to give them a really wonderful and peaceful experience as they said their goodbye to a sweet animal. Man, I got to tell you, I wasn't met very warmly with that. It was people were dialed into a crematory. What do you mean you don't have a crematory? What do you mean you're going to insert yourself into a relationship with a family you've never met before, and now you're going to meet them on the worst day of their life? Coleen, have you lost your mind? You're crazy, girl. You're crazy. And that was the reception I got until a few years down the road when many of those veterinarians had experienced the level of care that I could give to their families. And let's talk business for 1 second, you guys. Let's talk business. Every clinic operates off the Pareto principle, where 80% of their revenue is coming from 20% of their clients, right? And so it was that 20% that needed protected, because as a vet clinic, you wanted to make sure you retained that family. And so I was very much not only about the soft skills part of this business, but I was very much about the business aspect of it too. Because again, a clinic needs to retain their families. And so again, a few years down the road, they started to experience what happened when they sent families to me, that those families had a much more peaceful experience in saying goodbye. And one of the things that I told the veterinarians is, it really breaks my heart when I have a family say to me, I lost a dog 3 years ago and I can't get another one because I don't want to go through that again. And it says to me that they weren't given the support that they were given. All right, guys, let's come to today. Okay. What I see now is I see families that are beginning to be armed with more information so they can make a better decision at the end of life. I've got many of my members of the IHPC who are in the field daily to create a different experience for families as they approach that final day, whether it be providing hospice services, palliative care, pain management, whatever it is, so that a family, let's face it, at the end of it, It's the family that needs to get ready too to say that goodbye. And so what I'm starting to see is that families know better, and so they know the questions to ask. I'm starting to see that our veterinarians are embracing an end of life process that's much more peaceful than, just a quick euthanasia. And again, as I talk, and as many of my talks and education that I do and speaking engagements is, how do we move death from an event to an experience? And I'm starting to see a bit of a shift that people are wanting more. And even afterwards, to the innovative part, Shawn, and the question that you asked is, even the memorialization pieces, families are feeling more empowered to do things in much the same manner that they did for human loved ones, whether it be an urn or a necklace, much like what I wear, or anything else in between. And let me tell you something. I started out my career in the human death care industry. And as we get into pets, one of you guys said it as we were starting. A lot of people like their animals better than they like their people, right? And whew, man, I can attest to that. I can tell you stories for days about the vast differences in those relationships.
So that's fascinating. And I, as you were speaking about it, I'm ER vet by nature, and right now urgent care vet by trade. 30%, not 80%, but 30% of our business is euthanasia. That's where most euthanasia happen, in urgent care or in ER. And I kind of feel like, as I'm listening to you, that we could really up our game on that. Um, who is your customer right now? We have quite a following in the listeners. Who's your customer? Who should be like, I need to call Coleen because this makes sense? Who do you coach? Who do you help to up their game on this process?
So thank you for that question. My client, as you just put it together in that sentence like that, our client is that veterinarian who, and whether it's an ER practice like what you just said, or even a GP practice who says, I want to do better when it comes to the end. And as I've said countless times, you guys, the end doesn't mean it's over. Okay. Because if our millennials today say, if you did the end in a way that I didn't like it, I'm going to take my money down the street. And that's how they vote, right? They take their money down the street and they'll drive past 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 clinics before they get to the clinic who treats them in the manner that they want to be treated. And I'm not talking about being less expensive. Okay. Let's go to your ER scenario. Let's talk about that for 1 second. I'm going to swing back around to the client. The ER scenario, the thing that breaks my heart, Ivan, and I know you know what I'm talking about, is when you read the reviews online that says I showed up at that ER clinic with a sick animal in my hand and I left with a two, three, four, $5,000 bill and a dead dog, right? Because at when in grief we have a very tough time understanding. We just want to be understood. And when the conversations are going quickly, when the events are happening quickly, I leave and believe that you did nothing for me. And so I do what I do best. I run to social media and I put a review out there, right? So if we stand up a little bit taller and say, all right, ER clinic, GP practice. How can we take and make that end be an end where when they do go to social media and they use the power of their voice, it is to say, you should go to Ivan's clinic because even though I showed up with a deceased animal, I still got this experience. I still was able to do this. They still made the cold steel table go away because they did this. I have a beautiful webinar, for instance, that I do on reimagining the comfort room. And I air quote comfort every time because it's not comforting. It's not. But how can we turn that into being something that is talked about in a very good way versus running us through the mud, even though we did everything as a veterinarian, as a GP guy, as an ER girl, whatever it is, we did everything. It was still not taken in the manner that it should have been. They just misunderstood. So GP practices, practice managers. All right. We've got some really beautiful webinars that we do and that I do and that IHPC does on how you take the final phone call. How do you set that up? How do you brand the final event? Shawn made a comment a bit ago that this is a really dark discussion. You know what? Maybe it is. But at the end of the day, if what I'm known for when I'm done on this earthly existence is that I helped normalize grief, because death is a part of life, then that's what I want to do. I want to help us prepare for it. I want to help us do what we can do, whether it's in an ER practice, a GP practice, with my end of life vet care professionals that are out doing this every day. I want to normalize it. I want to make it an experience. And I want families to say the end was perfect. I didn't have a coulda, shoulda, woulda. I had a perfect ending. Imagine if every family that you, Ivan, and every other veterinarian listening to this podcast, imagine if they could say that about every family they worked with, knowing the end was perfect and the family could walk out the door and say, I have no regrets about how the end happened. Am I sad because the end happened? Most certainly, but I don't have a regret about how it happened.
That's so interesting, Colleen. It is a fascinating area, and it's so multifaceted. One of the things that you kind of triggered in my brain is this idea that we've talked a lot about. We talked a lot about burnout on this podcast, a lot about compassion fatigue, and when veterinary professionals like Ivan and others, go in and euthanize 5 dogs in a day, it doesn't feel very good. And so I think there's an education piece on the veterinary side as well. And so, help us understand what you bring to the table when it comes to kind of helping those veterinarians that, go through this, constantly having their tank emptied with these situations where the pet parents, are not experienced in this realm.
So here's what I'm going to start with, because not maybe I'm not going to say never, but maybe in a very limited amount of times that I can count on one hand, can I tell you I've ever been fatigued? And there may be a day that I had 10 families show up with all of them with their deceased animals in their arms. Okay. The first thing that I'm going to tell you is this is a profession I love. I love this. And so helping families on the worst day of their life fills me up. It fills me up. Okay. It doesn't wear me out. And it doesn't wear me out because I like it. And secondly, I know my professional boundaries. Okay. So let's go to Ivan. Ivan had 5 in a day. Here's what I'm going to tell a clinic. You have a person in the clinic who is wired like me. They are the ones who love sitting with families. They're the ones who love holding their hands. They're the ones who love wiping their tears. They're the ones who love doing that. What I see in clinics is that we broad brush all the employees and we say every employee in here is good at everything and should do everything. And I don't agree with that. You've got some employees who love the end of life process, and it fills them up just like it does me. And so as we look at our staff, the first thing I would do is I would find the advocate, the person who is the one who wants to make the end an experience. And in Ivan's situation, it may be a 24-hour clinic. We got to make sure we've got one on each shift, that you send that person in. And they're the ones that sit in with that family. They're the ones who are present, if asked, during euthanasia. They're the ones who sit in there and wipe the tears. They're the ones who do that because that fills us up. You can talk to all of my professionals in the International Association for Animal Hospice and Palliative Care. We get filled up on what we do. It's an honor for us to be there at the end. And so we see it differently.
That's amazing. We ran out of time, as we usually do. I do appreciate that I learned a new word today, the thanatologist, and I raised my eyebrow because I'm a foreigner. So every day you learn a new word. So I appreciate that. We end every episode in the same way. We're asking, what is the movie, book, TED Talk, YouTube video, something that inspired you recently is the first question.
The first one is I'm going to share with you because I'm at this stage in my life is the Arthur Brooks book, From Strength to Strength. And just a huge fan of that for us as us aging millennials or baby boomers as we need to kind of find that second curve in our life and to wrap our arms around with it, wrap our arms around it. So that's my latest book that has inspired me is that one.
And the last question for you, Coleen, is another innovator that you think would be a good guest for this show.
Man, I got to tell you, I am a huge fan of Dr. Tyler Carmack. She's out in the Virginia Beach area, and she's one of my members in the IHPC, and she is constantly innovating, not only within the practice she does in the field with her families, but also just herself personally. She's always innovating and is just a consummate learner. So I'm a huge fan of hers, and I fangirl on Tyler all the time. So Dr. Tyler Carmack, I'm holding her up right now.
Thank you so much for listening to the Veterinary Innovation Podcast. If you want to hear about our new episodes, please follow us on any social media channel. Also, you can check out our website at veterinaryinnovationpodcast.com. See you next week.